Hello, I am Everett Maxine. Today's episode includes adult content. Thank you for tuning in to The Absence of Her. Today's episode's title is The Pedophile and the Preacher's Son. I will begin with a quote by Alex L. You're not a victim for sharing your story. You are a survivor, setting the world on fire with your truth. And you never know who needs your light, your warmth, and your raging courage. His grin in my direction would always leave me uncomfortable. It's amazing what the brain can suppress. I should know that smile, that look that once laid over me in all drunkenness. I can still smell him reeking of alcohol and the feel of his sweaty skin as he laid on top of me in the bed he shared with his wife. The sound of his perverted laughter echoed in my ear as I tried to push him off of me and escape, but I was only 14 years old. I was no match for this fully grown man. I don't know if it was my tears or his conscience that stopped him from robbing me of my innocence that day. I may have left intact physically, but mentally I was never the same. For our remaining time at that apartment complex, I never looked at him the same. My shame kept me silent. Every time he looked at me, I felt disgusted. And every time I looked at him, I felt fear. That was the pedophile. It was the summer of 1996. I had just completed my freshman year of high school. My two favorite things to do were ride my bicycle and go to church. I grew up in a small town of Bay City, Texas, with a population of 18,000 people. The older I got, it seemed like the tension between my mom and I increased. If it were daytime, I would take off on my bike, and when night fell, I would just go walking when being at home became too much. A family at church asked Mom if I could spend the summer at their home because they didn't feel it was safe for me to be in the streets all the time. And of course, Mom said yes. The month of June would quickly pass by, and during July I would begin missing home. Regardless of how we fought and drove each other nuts, I always missed my mama. It was about the third week of July that I would go home for a visit. I was only 15. It was about 4 months before my 16th birthday. Nothing really changed between us. By the end of the week, I was hanging out in the streets again. I was young and still very much naive. There was no one I could really talk to about our challenges. Everyone just saw me as the rebellious teenager. And if no one ever saw a problem, well, how could they help? It would be Friday, July 19th of 1996. I was wearing a black short-sleeve bodysuit, which was popular back in the day, covered by a sleeveless baby doll dress with sunflowers printed all over it, and I wore sandals with that outfit that day. I walked around majority of the evening leading into night. I can't even remember what we argued about. I walked from here to there with no destination in mind, and by midnight my feet were sore and my body totally exhausted. I remember praying for a ride, but I quickly learned that night that the devil hears prayers too. A pickup pulled up. I didn't know the guy's name, but he told me his name and who he was, so I immediately felt comfortable with him. Not only was he the preacher's son, he was a member of the family I had been staying with. He was kind when he offered the ride, but then again, the devil wears many faces. It was late. I was tired. I wanted to be anywhere but home. I know some are thinking, it was late. He was a grown man. Why did I get in? He was the son of a preacher. Not only that, he was a member of the family I was living with. So being a 15-year-old girl, naive and trusting, I expected nothing more than a ride. Immediately when I got in, he started talking about we could run away out of town together. This sounded great to me. I figured I could find some type of work and survive on my own. He drove me to his apartment. I figured it was okay to chill for a little second, but when I entered, I began feeling uncomfortable. There were several locks on the door behind me, all of which he locked. And he had an efficiency apartment, something I had never seen before, and his bed sat perpendicular to the couch. I began wondering, was he expecting something I was not expecting to give? I tried to put the negative thoughts out of my mind, and as I sat on the couch, I told myself, just don't fall asleep, and everything will be okay. By then, it was about 1 a.m., and time got later, and it grew harder to remain awake and alert. He sat on his bed watching me, and I kept nodding, and finally my body gave in. About 2 a.m., I think it was, and I fell into a deep sleep. My body was physically exhausted from walking all day. Then I was wakened out of my sleep by his wet tongue licking me on my leg. And then he proceeded to my thigh. I tried to stop him, but he was convinced I wanted him and that I was just teasing him. And being sexually involved with a fully grown man was furthest from my mind. I will never claim to be perfect. I had made out with a teenage boy before, but this interaction with the preacher's son was totally out of my league. If I ran for the door, I would not be able to undo the locks before he reached me. Cell phones weren't as common then, so I couldn't call anyone. And no one even knew where I was. Bite him? Well, I was not stronger than him. I was trapped. This grown man got pleasure out of violating a minor young girl that night. He violated me in ways I was unprepared for. I was so afraid and disgusted. I just wanted it to end, and it seemed to go on forever. I don't know why it is I have never had much fight in me. When kids at school would pick on me, I would not fight back. And in that moment, he violated me. I was just numb. But something happened in that moment that he tried to force his private part in my mouth. I had taken all I could take that night. I fought him as hard as I could and began to wrestle to get to the door. I wrestled getting those locks undone. He came at me and began screaming with all power in his voice that he would kill me if I told anyone. As I finally got out the door, I guess he had had his way and was done with me because he didn't try to attack me any longer. His rage as he yelled at me, I didn't take his threat lightly. I walked down the street that night with so much shame. No one would understand. No one would believe me. And if I did find the courage to tell anyone, I would only feel they would blame me. I felt God had let me down once again. I was just a babe in Christ. And I didn't understand why he didn't protect me. I continued walking till I reached home. I didn't know what time it was. And as I opened the door, my mother was at the table preparing to leave for work. So it was 6 a.m. She didn't say a word nor ask where I had been. I had never stayed out all night. I said nothing and went to my room. A few days later, I returned to stay with the family I had been living with for the summer, and Mom had informed them that I had stayed out all night. They noticed behavior changes, but I still said nothing. It wasn't until my body began feeling uncomfortable and I felt it was a result of what he had done to me that I said something. Mom and the wife would take me to the hospital and warden. I was told what to say, and none of it included what had actually happened to me that night. Mom and I never discussed it. I had finally spoken up and the results were the same. My self-esteem was already low. After that, it completely plummeted. 15 years old, a teenager learning to figure out who she is, living in a chaotic home environment that no one really knew about, then went to live with others to be better protected, only to be violated by one of their family members. And when I finally spoke up, it was as if I was still being silenced. Minors are violated by family and friends every day, and for whatever reason, it is kept secret. I harbor no anger towards anyone. I have come to a place of forgiveness, even for the man that violated me. I truly believe my mother did what she thought was best at the time, but bearing something doesn't make it go away. Burying secrets only causes it to be a seed in your life. And as a seed begins to grow, it manifests from the inside out. The definition of a seed is a cause or latent being of a feeling, process, or condition. That seed takes root in our life, and it has an effect on our actions, our interactions with people, the things we do with our bodies, our feelings of rejection, our self-esteem, how we allow others to treat us. So, in order to be free of that, we need to stop burying secrets. The Bible says that we must eradicate that seed. Burying it only will continually affect your life. Have you ever wondered what seed was buried in a woman that chose to prostitute, strip, or remain in an abusive relationship? Have you ever just prayed for her instead of judging her? You never know what moment in her life made her feel worthless, and now dollar bills make her feel valuable. You never know how badly she wanted connection and someone to care about her. So she stays with an abusive man because she's yearned for someone to be there for her all her life. You never know what spirits infiltrated her as that family member or friend violated her body. Because some of us have been taught to be silent and remain silent so you may never know. I encourage you to stop the silence. The only way to heal is to stop the silence. The only one way to let another woman know, and males nowadays, that they are not alone is to stop the silence. Ephesians 3:1-4 says there is a time for everything and a season, every activity under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. It is a time to uproot that negative seed in your life. Speak out. I've shared my story with you today to know that you are not alone. Speak out so you could love yourself and become the woman that God created you to be. Thank you today for listening to The Absence of Her.